Midnight pressed heavily on the quiet Santa Fe neighborhood, the desert cold sinking deep into the bones of old adobe walls. Jessica Moore drove with her window cracked, the chill nipping at her skin as she tried to stay awake. The city was quieter than usual, all the color and chaos of her long detective shift finally ebbing into a weary silence. She rubbed her temple, glancing at the clock glowing blue on the dashboard. Just a few more minutes and she'd be home, she told herself. Maybe, just maybe, tonight she'd finally sleep. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, something darted from a vacant lot, fast and wild. Jessica's heart jumped. She slammed the brakes, headlights flaring across the darkness. In the harsh light stood a colt. Not just any horse. A skinny, mud-caked black colt, barely more than a shadow itself, limping with every step but chasing her car with a desperate, determined energy. His eyes were wide with panic, nostrils flared, hooves skittering and clattering on the cold asphalt. The sight was so out of place, Jessica just stared, breath caught in her chest. The colt's sides heaved as it staggered closer. For a moment, Jessica thought she must be imagining things. Santa Fe had its share of strays, but never something like this. She watched him, trembling in the pale glare of her headlights. His ribs showed, sharp beneath matted fur. Around his neck hung a frayed old leather halter, once tan but now so filthy it blended with his coat. Jessica's instincts kicked in. She pulled her cruiser over, snapped on the hazard lights, and stepped out, careful but urgent. Her boots crunched on gravel. The air smelled of rain and cold earth. She kept her movements slow, one hand up, as if approaching a wounded animal, because she was. "Easy, boy," she murmured, voice steady despite her racing pulse. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The colt shied at her voice, backing up a step, eyes rolling. But he didn't run. Instead, he seemed to study her, as if measuring her intent. Jessica took off her jacket, warm, worn, still holding the scent of her home, and held it out. When she got close enough, she saw something strange. Tucked into the halter was a small, dirty scrap of folded paper. She reached out gently, avoiding the colt's skittish head, and slipped the note free. Her fingers were clumsy with cold as she unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, the message brief. "Help. My brother is sick. No food, no water. Barn 14. Jessica felt her heart stop. The note was written in a child's hand, simple, desperate, and direct. Someone out there was in trouble. Her mind snapped into sharp focus. She dropped her jacket over the colt's shivering back, whispering comfort. The animal pressed against her side, trembling but somehow calm under her touch. She reached for her radio, voice low but urgent. "Dispatch. This is Detective Moore. I need immediate backup at the corner of Paseo and Canyon. Possible child endangerment. I've found a colt with a distress note. I'm proceeding to Barn 14. Send EMS and units ASAP." The reply was all static and code. But it was enough. Jessica's hands shook as she clipped the radio back. She looked at the colt, this unlikely mud-spattered messenger. "You brought me this far. Let's go see what else you need to show me." She guided the colt to her cruiser, but he balked at the vehicle, legs stiff and refusing. Jessica made a split-second decision, grabbed her flashlight, and jogged on foot instead. The colt following, limping but determined. Every noise in the night, a siren in the distance, a barking dog, a sudden gust of wind, made the colt flinch. But Jessica pressed on, adrenaline sharpening her senses, heart hammering in her chest. The streets were empty, windows dark. Jessica passed a battered mailbox with the number 14 barely visible beneath a layer of dust. There, a sagging barn loomed at the end of a gravel drive, half collapsed and swallowed by weeds. The colt let out a desperate whinny and bolted ahead, stumbling toward the structure, then turning to look back at Jessica, urging her to hurry. Jessica ran, her breath clouding in the cold flashlight beam jittering as she reached the barn. She could hear something inside, a faint, muffled sound, a child's cough, or maybe just the wind. The air was thick with fear and urgency. She hesitated only a second at the door, drawing her sidearm just in case, then burst inside. She didn't know what she'd find. Danger, despair, maybe hope. Jessica's mind raced, every second counting. In that moment, beneath the pale moonlight and the echo of her own racing heart, she realized this night, this strange, wild, terrifying night, was only just beginning. Jessica's boots hit the barn floor with a hollow thud, her flashlight cutting across rotted wood and scattered straw. The cold inside was biting, heavy with the sharp scent of mold, old manure, and something metallic that prickled her nerves. The black colt, Shadow, she decided in that split second, whinnied wildly, scraping at the ground with one battered hoof, then galloped ahead, his limping gait frantic with urgency. Jessica called out, "Police! Is anyone here?" Her words disappeared into the darkness. Her heart pounded as she scanned the shadows. The beam of her flashlight swept over piles of junk, sagging rafters, and finally caught on a tangle of small shapes huddled in the farthest corner of the barn. There, almost invisible against a dirty heap of hay, was a girl, no more than 8, her arms wrapped around a smaller, motionless bundle. The girl's face was fierce, blue eyes narrowed in terror, as if she'd been cornered by a wolf and was ready to fight. She held her baby brother tight, his little face flushed and damp with fever, body shivering under a filthy, threadbare blanket. Jessica knelt, lowering herself to their level, flashlight pointed away so as not to blind them. She took in the scene. The children's chapped lips, hollow cheeks, clothes stiff with days-old grime, a battered doll clutched to the girl's chest. The little boy whimpered weakly, his cries barely more than a rasp. "It's okay, sweetheart," Jessica said softly, her voice gentle but urgent. "I'm here to help you. My name is Jessica. Are you Emily?" She remembered the note, clutched it tighter in her palm. The girl pressed further back, fear radiating from her in waves. "Don't take my brother," she whispered hoarsely, tears shining but unfallen. Her voice was cracked from thirst and crying. Shadow, the black colt, came right up to Emily's side, snorting softly. He nudged her shoulder with his nose, then settled protectively between the children and Jessica. Jessica moved slowly, her hands open, her posture as non-threatening as she could manage. "I promise I won't hurt you or your brother. I brought help." Her breath made small clouds in the freezing air as she gently wrapped her spare jacket around the shivering boy. "What's your name?" she asked, meeting the girl's eyes. "Emily," came the shaky reply. "His name is Sammy." Jessica nodded, fighting the urge to cry. "Emily, I need to check on your brother, okay?" She reached out, feeling the boy's forehead. It was burning up. His breaths were shallow, labored. He moaned, trying to twist away, but Emily clung to him fiercely, her dirty fingers knotted in his shirt. "How long have you been here?" Jessica asked, urgency sharpening her words. Emily's chin wobbled. 2 days. Maybe 3. Mama said she'd come back, but..." She couldn't finish. Her face crumpled, eyes full of accusation and shame. Jessica's mind raced. No food, no water for days, a sick infant, and a terrified child surviving on hope and instinct, and a colt as their only guardian. She fought down her anger at whatever parent could leave their kids like this. In the distance, she heard the faint wail of sirens, backup and EMS finally coming. Jessica pulled out her radio. "This is Detective Moore. I have 2 children, one infant with a high fever, severely dehydrated, possibly malnourished. Location confirmed. Barn 14, southeast quadrant. Requesting immediate medical assistance." She crouched beside Emily, squeezing the little girl's cold hand. "You did so good, Emily. You protected your brother. Help is on the way now." Emily shrank from her touch at first, but Shadow nudged her again, resting his heavy head in her lap. The girl looked at the colt, and something broke in her. Her body shuddered with silent sobs. Jessica took a slow breath, remembering her own childhood nights, how loneliness used to sit heavy on her chest like a weight she could never shake off. She saw herself in Emily, small and fierce and so afraid of being left behind. As the sirens drew closer, the barn was flooded with flashing lights, red, blue, white, turning the night into a dizzying kaleidoscope. Medics burst through the doors, their faces set and professional, carrying gear, blankets, and warmth. Jessica stood aside but didn't leave. She watched as Emily tried to follow them, panic rising as a medic reached for Sammy. "Don't take him from me!" Emily screamed, gripping her brother tighter. "It's okay," Jessica said quickly, moving to kneel beside Emily again. "I'll stay with you, I promise. I won't let anything happen to him." She reached for Emily's hand, holding it tight while the medics checked Sammy's fever and carried him gently to the waiting ambulance. Shadow whinnied, pacing nervously, refusing to leave Emily's side. He stomped his hooves at the unfamiliar people and strange smells, his wild eyes never leaving the children. The medics were careful, murmuring reassurances as they loaded Sammy onto a stretcher, wrapped him in warm blankets, and set an oxygen mask over his small face. Emily, still clutching Jessica's hand, finally let out a long, shuddering breath. "He's all I got left," she whispered. "Please don't let them take him away." Jessica met the girl's eyes and saw the truth. Emily was more than just a scared child. She was a survivor, brave and battered, holding on to her brother and her horse with everything she had. "You're not alone anymore," Jessica promised, her own voice thick. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." As the paramedics rushed Sammy to the ambulance and Emily climbed in after him, Jessica scooped Shadow's trembling body into her arms, struggling with his gangly legs and battered frame. She didn't care if she got mud on her uniform, didn't care that her night had turned upside down. She whispered, "Thank you, Shadow. You saved them." The night felt colder somehow, but as Jessica climbed into the back of the ambulance beside Emily and Sammy, she knew a new fight was just beginning. A fight to protect these children and the wild black colt who refused to let them be forgotten. The white fluorescence of the hospital never seemed to dim, no matter the hour. Jessica sat hunched in an uncomfortable vinyl chair, her gaze fixed on the double doors to the pediatric wing. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward dawn, but exhaustion gnawed at her more than sleep ever could. She gripped her phone in one hand and a cooling cup of black coffee in the other, barely registering either. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely out of control. Down the hallway, Emily sat curled in a waiting room chair, knees to her chest, arms wrapped tight around Shadow's neck. The hospital staff had protested. Horses weren't allowed in waiting rooms, much less stray, mud-caked colts. But Jessica hadn't budged. "The colt stays. He's the reason this little girl is still breathing. If you try to separate them, you'll have to go through me." Something in her tone, or maybe the wild panic in Emily's eyes, convinced them to make an exception. It was a strange sight. A little girl and a black colt huddled together on cold linoleum, the animal's muzzle resting gently in her lap, his breath coming slow and steady. Every so often, Emily would whisper something to him, tears tracing silent lines down her cheeks. Shadow seemed to understand, responding with a soft snort or nudge, as if grounding her against the storm inside. Jessica watched them, the ache in her chest growing. It was more than sympathy. It was memory, old wounds reopening in the fluorescent silence. As a child, she'd spent long hours alone in hospital corridors, waiting for news that never seemed good enough, listening to the echo of adults arguing about what was best for her. She knew too well the terror of not belonging, of wondering if the world had forgotten you. The hours dragged. Nurses passed by with gentle smiles and careful steps, their voices muffled by closed doors and whispered updates. Occasionally, one would offer Emily a juice box or an encouraging word. Emily refused everything, shrinking further into herself, clutching Shadow as if the Colt's touch was the only thing holding her to this world. Finally, a doctor emerged, a tall, dark-haired woman with tired eyes and a kind smile. She knelt beside Emily, speaking in soft tones. "Your brother is very sick, but he's strong. We're giving him medicine for his fever and fluids to help him get better." "You did something very brave, Emily. You saved him." Emily nodded, but didn't reply. Her hand twisted into Shadow's mane, her entire body tense with worry. The doctor stood and approached Jessica, speaking low. "Sammy's going to recover, but it's going to take time. He was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and running a dangerously high fever. If you hadn't found them, if that Colt hadn't gotten your attention, I don't know if either of them would have made it through the night." Jessica's relief was nearly overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by a harder truth. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. The doctor's face grew serious. "Child Services has been notified. The children will need a safe place to stay while we figure out their situation. It's likely they'll be placed in foster care, at least temporarily." Jessica's chest tightened. She looked at Emily, then back at the doctor. "They can't be split up. She'll fall apart if she loses her brother, or that horse." The doctor's smile was gentle, but tinged with resignation. "We'll do everything we can, Detective Moore. But these things aren't always in our hands." The day bled slowly into morning. Sunlight crawled across the floor, throwing long shadows against sterile walls. Jessica stayed in the waiting room, not because she had to, but because she couldn't bring herself to leave. She watched as Emily drifted in and out of a restless doze, never letting go of Shadow. Sometimes she whimpered in her sleep, the kind of sounds only children make when they're caught between dreams and memories. Every now and then, a nurse would pause and smile at the Colt. "What's his name?" she asked Emily. Emily's answer was always the same, a small, broken whisper. "Shadow." Jessica sat nearby, her own memories haunting her. She remembered being a little girl, desperate for someone to fight for her, to promise her she wouldn't be forgotten. That feeling, the one Emily was living now, was a scar Jessica carried even as an adult. She hadn't realized until tonight how deep that scar ran, or how badly she wanted to protect these children from the loneliness she'd once felt. The hospital staff tried to encourage Emily to eat, to rest, to shower. She refused all of it. When a social worker finally arrived, a pleasant woman named Carla with glasses and a clipboard, she tried her best to coax Emily from Shadow's side. "Emily, honey, we need to talk about where you'll stay while your brother is getting better. There are nice families who can take care of you both." Emily's eyes flashed with fear. "Don't take me away from him. Please, we have to stay together. We promised Mama." Jessica, hearing the panic in Emily's voice, stepped in. "Carla, she's been through hell. Can we give her some time? I'll stay with them. I'll make sure she eats and rests." Carla hesitated, then nodded. "I'll see what I can do." The hours passed. Jessica bought Emily a chocolate milk and a granola bar from the vending machine. After a while, Emily took them, wordless, and shared the milk with Shadow, pouring it into a hospital cup. Shadow licked at it, eyes half closed, content to be near the little girl who trusted him with everything she had left. Late that afternoon, a nurse emerged with good news. Sammy's fever was finally breaking. Emily nearly collapsed with relief, tears streaming down her face. She buried her face in Shadow's mane and wept, the colt standing as still as stone. Jessica watched, her own eyes misting. She made a silent vow, her jaw set with determination. "I won't let another child feel abandoned. Not if I can help it. In the space between worlds, between fear and hope, past and future, grief and belonging, Jessica made her decision. She would fight for Emily, Sammy, and the unlikely black colt who had led her here. She would not let them slip through the cracks, and as the sun finally set over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, Emily, Shadow, and Jessica huddled together in the hospital room, 3 souls united by fate and the stubborn, unbreakable bond of survival. A week after that terrible night, the hospital released Sammy into Jessica's care. The temporary custody papers felt strange in her hands, official and cold, but offering a glimmer of something she'd thought long gone: hope. Jessica didn't tell Emily or Sammy that she barely slept for days waiting for the paperwork to come through, or that she'd argued with 3 social workers and 2 hospital administrators just to keep the siblings together, and to let Shadow stay with them. The little black colt had become a permanent fixture, following Emily's every step with the silent vigilance of an old friend. Santa Fe's morning sun washed over Jessica's adobe ranch house on the outskirts of town, casting the property in golden light. As Jessica parked her battered pickup in the drive, Emily peered nervously through the window, holding Sammy on her hip. Shadow circled the yard, sniffing at the breeze, his coat finally clean and glossy, his spirit calmer since the chaos of the city. Inside, Jessica tried to keep her voice light and welcoming. "This is home now, at least for a while. You can help me take care of the horses, and there's plenty of room to run." She set down a basket of groceries, simple things, but the fridge was full, the cupboards bursting with food and treats she'd never have bought for herself. Emily said nothing, her eyes darting to every corner, muscles tense like a cornered animal. That first night, she refused to sleep in the big bed Jessica made for her in the guest room, preferring the rough comfort of Shadow's stall in the stable. Jessica found her curled up in the straw, arms tight around the colt's neck, using his side for warmth. Shadow lay still as stone, as if he understood she needed him more than ever. Jessica left a fleece blanket and a glass of milk within arm's reach and whispered, "Good night, Emily. I'll be right inside if you need me." Sammy fared better, perhaps too young to remember the worst. Jessica rocked him gently each night, singing soft lullabies until his cries faded into sleep. Still, every time Jessica left the room, Sammy's little fists would reach out, clutching at her shirt with desperate strength, as if she too might disappear at any second. Jessica introduced small routines, never pushing, always inviting. She woke early, opening the windows to let the morning breeze fill the house with sage and sunlight. She made breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, apple slices cut into star shapes, and set the table, though sometimes only Shadow joined her for the meal. Jessica took her time with chores, always asking if Emily wanted to help brush Shadow or fill his water trough. Some days Emily refused to come out, hiding behind bales of hay. But on a Tuesday morning, As dawn painted the sky pink and orange, Jessica found Emily quietly braiding wildflowers into Shadow's mane. The colt stood absolutely still, accepting the crown of blossoms with gentle dignity. It was the first time Jessica saw a hint of a smile. "Shadow looks like a king," Jessica said, crouching nearby. Emily shrugged, but her cheeks dimpled just for a second. Later that day, Jessica led the children and Shadow to the edge of the property, where the earth sloped down into a wild meadow. "This is your space, too," Jessica said, handing Emily a lead rope. "You don't have to be afraid here." Emily's eyes were wide, but she took the rope, walking beside Shadow, her bare feet cool against the grass. Some nights, Jessica heard Emily cry out, caught in nightmares she could not escape. Jessica would sit quietly in the doorway of the stable, waiting for Emily to wake, then gently brush Shadow's mane or hum a quiet tune. Sometimes Emily joined in, the simple melody chasing shadows away. Each morning, Jessica left the stable door open, never locking Emily in or out, letting her choose safety for herself. Little by little, trust began to grow, slow as rain in the desert, but no less precious. Emily started to speak, just a few words at first, mostly about Shadow or the weather. When Jessica asked, "Do you like school?" Emily only shrugged, but when Jessica asked, "Do you want to help me feed the horses?" Emily nodded, hope flickering in her eyes. One afternoon, as the wind rattled the cottonwoods and the house filled with the warm smell of baking bread, Jessica sat with Emily at the kitchen table. She tried to keep her voice casual, but her heart hammered in her chest. "Emily, do you think you'll want to stay here? Even just for a little while?" Emily hesitated. Her small hand stroked Shadow's nose, eyes glued to the colt's gentle gaze. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Will you send us away if someone wants us?" Jessica shook her head, her own voice rough. "No, honey, you're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you, and I won't send you away. You're not alone anymore." It was the first promise she'd made in years that truly mattered. Emily didn't answer right away, but she slid closer to Jessica, Shadow pressed close on her other side. Sammy giggled in his high chair, reaching for Jessica with applesauce on his chin, and for the first time Jessica felt the walls of her house, once echoing with loneliness, fill with the fragile beginnings of laughter, trust, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be home. Days passed. Emily spent more time outside, riding Shadow bareback at a slow walk, her hair wild in the wind. She painted chalk drawings on the adobe walls, taught Sammy how to feed Shadow small carrots, and sometimes let Jessica braid her hair. The anxiety never fully disappeared. Sometimes Emily would still freeze at a sudden noise or ask, "Is Mama coming?" in a shaky voice. But her smile returned more often, and her eyes lost their haunted edge. One evening, as the sky turned gold and the coyotes sang in the distance, Emily whispered, "Shadow likes it here." Jessica squeezed her hand. "So do I." And so, the ranch began to heal, not just for Emily and Sammy, but for Jessica and Shadow too. They were four lost souls, stumbling toward each other in the long New Mexico twilight, finding in each other the promise of a new beginning. As the seasons shifted and the air in Santa Fe turned sharper, Jessica realized it was time for Emily to start school. It was a day Jessica had both dreaded and hoped for. She knew the ranch had become a cocoon for the children, a safe, quiet world built on routine, gentleness, and the bond between girl and colt. But sooner or later, Emily would need to face the world outside their sanctuary. a world less forgiving and more unpredictable than the fields and stables of Jessica's home. The first morning of school, Emily clung to Shadow's mane as Jessica braided her hair at the ranch gate. Sammy gurgled from the stroller, waving a plastic horse. Emily's backpack looked enormous against her thin shoulders, decorated with hand-drawn stickers, hearts, horseshoes, and a cartoon colt with big, trusting eyes. Jessica knelt in front of her, tucking a note and a lucky silver button into Emily's coat pocket. "If you feel scared, just touch this," she whispered. "It's your reminder that you're brave and you can always come home." Emily nodded, too nervous to speak. Shadow nudged her gently, as if reminding her he'd be waiting. The school bus pulled up in a cloud of red dust, engine rumbling, children's laughter echoing from inside. Jessica squeezed Emily's hand one last time, watching as she climbed the steps and vanished behind the glare of dirty windows. The day dragged. Jessica kept busy with chores, but her mind was at the elementary school a mile down the road, wondering if Emily was eating her lunch or sitting alone. The silence on the ranch felt heavier without the sound of Emily's laughter and Shadow's constant whinnying. That afternoon, as the sun slanted low and the wind whipped across the fields, Jessica waited at the fence line, Shadow by her side. The bus arrived with a squeal of brakes. Emily stepped down, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. A group of older kids lingered behind her, snickering. Jessica felt a knot form in her stomach. Emily trudged toward the gate, backpack dragging in the dust. "How was your day, honey?" Jessica asked softly. Emily didn't answer, but Shadow trotted over, letting out a high, sharp whinny that startled the other kids. They stopped, wide-eyed, as Shadow reared slightly, his mane flying and hooves pawing the air. Emily turned, her face pale with humiliation. "They called me the girl with the crazy horse," she muttered, voice trembling. "They said I was weird because I live on a ranch, because I talk to my horse more than people." Jessica knelt, pulling Emily into a hug. Shadow snorted, stepping between Emily and the lingering bullies, who quickly retreated down the road. "Hey," Jessica said gently, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "It's okay to be different. Shadow is family. You're brave for loving him so much." But the next day, things got worse. Emily came home with her sweater torn, her cheeks blotchy from crying. The teasing grew sharper, whispers in the hallway, notes stuffed into her locker. "Horse girl," "stable rat." Even some of the teachers didn't seem to know what to do, gently steering Emily away from the other kids, never asking her about the drawings she made of Shadow on her notebooks. Jessica received a call from the principal late one afternoon. She arrived at the school office to find Emily curled up in a plastic chair, clutching a folder to her chest. Tears dried on her cheeks. "Miss Moore, we're concerned," the principal began, her tone measured but distant. "Emily's having a hard time adjusting. There have been incidents. And well, bringing a colt to the school fence every afternoon. It's unusual. It's distracting for the other students." Jessica kept her voice calm, but her jaw was tight. "Shadow isn't a distraction. He's family. He helps Emily feel safe." She explained how Emily and Sammy had spent nights alone in a barn, how Shadow had led Jessica to them and saved their lives. "He's not just a horse. He's her protector. The bond they have is what's kept her going. Please try to understand." The principal hesitated, finally nodding. "We'll do our best. But you need to know, Emily's told some classmates things that concern us, about her mom leaving, about being alone. We want to help, but..." Jessica felt the sting of frustration. She told the truth. She protected her brother for days. She's stronger than any adult I know. That night, Jessica sat with Emily on the porch, the sky a blanket of purple and gold, shadow grazing nearby. "I know school is hard," Jessica said quietly. "People don't always understand when you're different. But you don't have to change for them. You just have to be yourself." Emily wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I'm scared they'll find out more. About Mama. About how we lived before." Jessica pulled her close. "You're safe now. You don't have to protect anyone but yourself and Sammy. Let me worry about the rest." Days passed. Jessica learned Emily had been her brother's protector for far longer than she'd realized. Long nights alone, days spent searching for scraps of food, always making sure Sammy was safe, even when their mother vanished for days at a time. The guilt and shame ran deep, and Jessica saw how Emily braced for disappointment, expecting kindness to vanish at any moment. The questions gnawed at Jessica. Was she doing enough? Could she really help these children heal, or was she out of her depth? Every setback felt personal, every cruel word from classmates another wound she couldn't protect Emily from. Still, she refused to give up. One Friday afternoon, as Emily trudged from the bus, Shadow broke into a joyful canter, kicking up clouds of dust. Emily's frown melted as the colt nuzzled her backpack, nearly knocking her over. For the first time in days, she giggled, burying her face in Shadow's neck. Jessica watched, her heart full. The world outside was still harsh and unkind, but inside the fence line, the little family stood together, fragile but unbroken, holding on to hope in the face of every storm. Just as the late spring sun brought new green to the ranch, a shadow from Emily and Sammy's past returned, unexpected and unwelcome. Jessica had just finished repairing a fence when she noticed a battered blue sedan idling at the end of the driveway. She paused, heart beating a little faster. Visitors were rare out here, and something about the vehicle's battered look and hesitant presence made her uneasy. Emily and Sammy were out back, feeding carrots to Shadow. The colt whinnied softly, ears pricked forward, sensing Jessica's tension. She wiped her hands on her jeans and walked slowly to the car, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. A woman stepped out, her appearance jarring and out of place against the peaceful ranch. She was thin and tired-looking, hair in a messy ponytail, mascara smudged under her eyes, fingers trembling as she clutched a worn purse. Jessica recognized her instantly. Lisa, Emily, and Sammy's mother. Jessica had only seen her once at the hospital, disheveled and desperate. But here in the daylight, Lisa looked even more fragile, haunted by regret and exhaustion. Lisa managed a shaky smile. "Is Emily here? And Sammy? I know I should have called. I just needed to see my kids." Jessica's instincts warred within her. She wanted to protect the children at all costs, but she also saw the agony in Lisa's eyes, the raw ache of a mother who had lost her way. "They're here," Jessica replied, measured but not unkind. "But you can't just show up like this, Lisa. They need stability. They're still healing." Lisa nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I've messed up, Jess. I'm trying. I went to a meeting. I'm clean now, 3 weeks. Please, can I see them?" Jessica hesitated, then led Lisa to the backyard, heart pounding. Emily saw her mother before anyone could prepare her. She froze, carrot in hand, eyes wide and full of a jumbled storm of hope, dread, and confusion. Sammy, too young to grasp the tension, toddled over and squealed, "Mama!" Lisa scooped him into her arms, kissing his cheeks, tears running down her face. Emily hung back, every muscle tight. Shadow stepped between Emily and Lisa, stamping a hoof, body rigid and head high, a living barrier of muscle and loyalty. Lisa reached for Emily, voice trembling. Sweetie, I'm so sorry. I missed you so much. Emily's hands balled into fists at her sides. You said you'd come back before. Her words, soft but razor-sharp, cut through the morning air. Jessica stood close, ready to intervene. Lisa tried to bridge the gap, tears streaming. I know, honey. And I let you down. I was sick. But I'm better now. I want to make it right. Shadow pawed the earth, snorting. Emily hesitated, then reached out and stroked Shadow's neck, seeking his comfort. You always leave, she whispered. You always say you'll change. The pain in Lisa's face was plain. She knelt in the grass, Sammy in her lap, and pleaded, Please, Emmy, give me a chance to be your mom again. Jessica watched, torn between sympathy and suspicion. She had read enough case files to know how often promises went unkept. Lisa, child services will need to be involved. This isn't just a visit. You're not cleared to take them, not after everything they've been through. You have to prove you're ready. Lisa wiped her tears, nodding desperately. I'll do whatever they ask. I'll go to more meetings, find a job, get a place, anything. Emily stared at the ground, jaw trembling. Shadow gently nudged her, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. Jessica knelt beside her. Emily, do you want to talk to your mom alone? Or would you rather I stay? Emily shook her head quickly. Stay, please. Lisa's shoulders sagged. I get it. I know you're angry. I was lost, but I never stopped loving you. The visit was tense and awkward. Lisa tried to share stories, promising better days, but every attempt was met with silence or one-word answers. Jessica made small talk, filling the space when the quiet got too heavy. After an hour, Lisa stood, holding Sammy a moment longer before kissing his cheek and setting him down. She looked at Emily, heartbreak written across her face. I'll come back soon, baby. I'll do better, I promise. Emily didn't answer. Shadow pressed close to her, eyes never leaving Lisa until she was gone. After Lisa drove off, Emily stood very still in the yard, Shadow's nose pressed to her cheek. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she blinked them away. She always leaves, she whispered, no matter what she says. Jessica pulled Emily into her arms, holding her close. I know, sweetheart. You don't have to forgive her if you're not ready. You don't have to go with her unless you want to. That's your choice. The days that followed were tense. Child Services called, setting a date for a hearing to decide whether Lisa could regain custody. Emily grew quiet and withdrawn, nightmares returning with a vengeance. She clung to Shadow, whispering secrets to him in the dark, afraid to hope, afraid to trust. Jessica watched helplessly, anger and fear warring in her chest. She spent late nights reading case law, talking to counselors, and gathering letters from teachers and neighbors about how Emily and Sammy had thrived at the ranch. She was determined. She would fight for these children, even if it meant taking on the system itself. One night, Emily crept into Jessica's room, her voice barely above a breath. If they make us go back, will you come find us again? Jessica's heart broke at the question. She knelt, hugging Emily fiercely. If you ever need me, I'll always find you, I promise. The past had returned with its shadows, threatening everything Jessica, Emily, Sammy, and Shadow had built. But Jessica was no stranger to darkness. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the only way through was to hold on tighter and fight for the family you chose. The day of the custody hearing dawned gray and unsettled, the New Mexico sky threatening rain as Jessica drove the children into Santa Fe. Emily sat in the back seat, her small fists clutching Shadow's braided lead rope, though the colt himself rode in a borrowed horse trailer hitched behind them, eyes wide, ears twitching at every turn. Jessica kept glancing at the rearview mirror, her heart pounding for the children and the family they had all fought so hard to build. When they arrived at the courthouse, Jessica parked by the dusty steps, helping Emily and Sammy out first. The building loomed overhead, its old stone walls heavy with the weight of all the lives changed inside. Shadow whinnied nervously from the trailer as Jessica led Emily and Sammy inside. The staff at security eyed the colt with disbelief, but when they saw the way Emily pressed her face to the horse's neck, trembling with fear, they just nodded her through. It wasn't the first time this courthouse had made exceptions for a child's desperate needs. Inside the courtroom, the light was flat and cold, the air too still. Emily sat at Jessica's side, Shadow's lead rope looped securely around her wrist, her eyes fixed on the floor. Sammy sat beside her, clutching a battered toy truck and swinging his legs. Lassa, pale and fidgety, sat across the aisle with her court-appointed lawyer, her face tight with hope and exhaustion. The judge entered, his presence somber but not unkind. Papers rustled, voices murmured. The bailiff called the hearing to order, and suddenly everything felt terrifyingly real. The first to testify was Lisa. She spoke in a voice that trembled, but grew stronger with each word. I know I've made mistakes. I was sick. I'm working to get better. I go to meetings every week. I have a new job and a little apartment outside town. I want to be a mother to my kids again. I miss them every second they're gone. Jessica watched Lisa closely, searching for sincerity and seeing to her surprise real pain and effort. But as Lisa spoke, her frustration began to crack through the surface. She grew agitated as the judge questioned her missed check-ins, her unstable living arrangements, her history. I'm trying, she burst out. No one gives me a break. I love my kids, and I'll do whatever it takes. The judge nodded, but made careful notes, eyes lingering on Emily, who seemed to shrink further into her seat. When it was Emily's turn, Jessica squeezed her hand. Emily's voice was small but clear, her whole body shaking. My mom, she would leave us. She would say she was going out, and then not come back for a long time. Sometimes there wasn't any food. I took care of Sammy. Shadow, too. We were always waiting. I was always scared. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached for Shadow, who'd been allowed to stand quietly at the back of the room. The colt nickered softly, stepping forward, his black mane brushing Emily's face as if to shield her from the world. The courtroom hushed. Even the judge's eyes softened. Jessica took the stand next. Her own hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice grew stronger with each word. Emily and Sammy have been through more than any children should. Since coming to live with me, they've flourished. Emily is learning to trust, to smile, to feel safe. Shadow, the colt, he's part of their healing. He helped them survive, and they helped me too. Jessica's voice cracked, but she continued. I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers, but I promise you, I won't give up on them. They deserve a family who won't walk away. The judge listened in silence, the weight of the decision heavy in the air. When Lisa took the stand again, her anger bubbled over. You don't know what it's like to be me, she snapped, her composure crumbling. No one ever helps. They just take things away. She glared at Jessica and at the judge, her frustration filling the room. Jessica saw Emily flinch, shrinking away from her mother's words. She reached for her, pulling her close. Shadow, sensing Emily's distress, stepped between them, his body tense and protective. The judge cleared his throat, asking Lisa gently but firmly to step down. The lawyers made their closing statements, But to Jessica, it all blurred together, a stream of legal jargon and pleas for the best interests of the children. She kept her arm around Emily, heart pounding with every second that passed. Finally, after what felt like hours, the judge turned to face them all. He spoke slowly, clearly, his words carrying the force of finality. This court has heard testimony from all parties. While the mother's efforts at recovery are recognized, the evidence of past neglect and the emotional needs of the children are paramount. I rule that Jessica Moore is to retain custody of Emily and Samuel, with supervised visitation allowed for Lisa, pending continued recovery. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Emily broke down in sobs, collapsing into Jessica's arms. Shadow pressed his nose to Emily's hair, snorting softly, his presence grounding her in the flood of relief and gratitude. Lisa sobbed quietly, her head in her hands. Jessica's heart ached for her, but she knew the judge was right. The children needed safety, stability, and above all, the certainty that someone would stay. As the room emptied, the court clerk pressed adoption paperwork into Jessica's hand, murmuring, "Just in case you want to make this forever." Outside the courthouse, rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing. Emily stood beneath the awning, Shadow beside her, Sammy clutching Jessica's hand. "You did it," Emily whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "You didn't leave." Jessica knelt, hugging both children close, Shadow nuzzling in for the embrace. "None of us are leaving, not ever. We're family now." In that moment, beneath the gray Santa Fe sky, surrounded by love and the living symbol of their survival, Jessica realized what they had built, out of heartbreak, hope, and relentless courage, was something that could never be broken. The months that followed the court hearing brought a new rhythm to the ranch, a gentle pulse of hope, growth, and the kind of joy that only comes after great sorrow. Gone were the restless nights when Emily woke screaming from nightmares, and the mornings when Sammy cried until his voice cracked, afraid that Jessica might disappear. Little by little, trust and laughter took root, turning the house and fields into a place where wounds could finally begin to heal. The biggest change was in Emily. With each sunrise, she seemed to grow stronger, more confident. She still clung to Shadow, but now her connection with the black colt was marked by celebration rather than fear. They ran together at dawn across the meadow, Emily's hair streaming behind her, Shadow's mane wild in the wind. Sometimes Jessica would watch from the porch, coffee warming her hands, a smile tugging at her lips as Emily whooped with delight, the colt whinnying back like he understood every word. School, too, had changed. At first, Emily was still shy and wary, hovering on the fringes of the playground, but slowly kids began to approach her. Some were curious about Shadow, who still waited at the fence every afternoon, his glossy coat gleaming in the sun. One day, a classmate named Lucy dared to pet him, and after that, others followed. By Halloween, Emily's circle of friends had grown, and Jessica sometimes found herself hosting giggling groups of children who came to the ranch to brush Shadow, feed him apples, or draw pictures of their favorite miracle horse. One crisp Saturday morning, the ranch filled with the sounds of children's laughter. Jessica set up hay bales in the pasture, letting the kids take turns leading Shadow around a makeshift obstacle course. Sammy tottered behind, squealing in delight as Shadow nuzzled his cheek, the colt's gentle presence making even the shyest child feel brave. Jessica caught Emily beaming with pride, her eyes bright as she watched her friends gather around her, no longer the girl with the crazy horse, but a leader, a friend, and slowly but surely, a kid again. It wasn't just the children who changed. Shadow, once a trembling, mud-caked stray, had become the very heart of the family. One afternoon, while Jessica and Emily were collecting eggs from the henhouse, a neighbor's dog slipped under the fence and charged at Sammy, barking wildly. Before Jessica could even move, Shadow bolted across the field, placing himself squarely between Sammy and the dog. He stamped, snorted, and arched his neck, his body a wall of protection. The dog, startled, backed away, and Jessica swooped in to scoop up Sammy, her hands shaking with relief. Later that evening, as the family sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa, Emily wrapped her arms around Shadow's neck. "You're our hero," she whispered, planting a kiss on his velvet muzzle. Jessica ruffled Emily's hair, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude for the colt who had saved them all in his own quiet way. To celebrate their new life together, Emily decided to make something special for Shadow. She spent days hunched over the kitchen table with scraps of fabric, bits of thread, and a fierce determination. When she was done, she slipped out to the stable and, with trembling fingers, buckled a new halter around Shadow's head. She'd stitched their names, Emily, Sammy, Jessica, along the strap in bright, careful letters. Shadow's ears flicked forward as Emily whispered, "Now you'll always know you're part of our family." Jessica watched from the doorway, tears prickling her eyes. She saw how much it meant to Emily to give something back to Shadow, to claim him as her own, not just as a rescuer, but as chosen family. The colt tossed his head, showing off his new halter, and Emily laughed, the sound ringing out across the quiet evening. News of Emily's transformation spread through the school and the small Santa Fe community. Her teacher noticed her newfound confidence and nominated her for the school's annual Kindness Award. Jessica and Sammy sat in the front row as Emily, cheeks flushed with excitement, stood on stage at the assembly, clutching her certificate. She smiled shyly at her classmates, who clapped and cheered. For the first time, Emily stood tall, no longer the frightened girl who hid behind her hair and her horse, but someone others looked up to, a survivor who had turned her pain into strength and kindness. Life on the ranch grew richer with each passing day. Jessica's friends and neighbors stopped by more often, dropping off pies or vegetables from their gardens, or just staying for coffee and a chat. Sometimes, they'd bring their children to visit, eager to meet the famous Shadow and the brave kids he watched over. The old house, once so silent, now pulsed with laughter, music, and the smells of baking bread and roasting chiles. Evenings became a time of ritual. Jessica, Emily, and Sammy would sit on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, Shadow grazing nearby. They would share stories, read books, and make plans for the future. Sometimes Emily would reach for Jessica's hand and say, almost shyly, "Thank you for finding us." Jessica always squeezed back, her heart full. "You found me too, kiddo. That's what family is." It wasn't always perfect. There were setbacks, days when old fears crept back, nights when Emily needed the comfort of sleeping in Shadow's stall, or when Sammy awoke crying for his mother. But now there was a sense of safety, a foundation strong enough to weather the storms. Together, they were building something new, a home rooted in loyalty, hope, and the fierce, unbreakable love of a family remade. It was a windy spring afternoon when Emily sat at Jessica's kitchen table, pencil poised over a clean sheet of lined paper, the prompt for her latest school assignment printed in block letters at the top. What family means. The windows rattled in their frames as Shadow's shadow drifted by outside, the colt's head occasionally popping into view as he grazed beneath the cottonwoods. Sammy sprawled on the rug, stacking wooden blocks, every so often glancing up to make sure Emily was still there. Emily frowned, erasing a word, then starting again. Writing about family should have been simple, she thought, but her heart thumped with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Family was supposed to be something you were born into, something that lasted no matter what. But for her, family had always felt slippery, unreliable, something she had to fight to keep. Jessica bustled around the kitchen, humming as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The house was filled with warm smells and golden light, every corner echoing with the laughter and chaos that had become their new normal. Every so often, Jessica would glance over, offering a reassuring smile or a gentle word of encouragement. "Take your time, Em. Just write what feels true." Emily hesitated, chewing on her pencil. She stared at Shadow outside, his glossy black coat catching the last of the sunlight, his gentle eyes fixed on the window as if he was watching over her. She thought of all the times he'd protected her, on the night he chased down Jessica's car, in the barn when she was alone and afraid, in the schoolyard when the world felt too big and too cruel. Family, she realized, wasn't about blood or promises made and broken. It was about who showed up and stayed, even when things got hard. She bent over her paper and began to write, the words coming faster now. Family means you're never left behind. When my mom left, I was scared and alone. But Shadow didn't know me, and he never let me go. He stood by me when no one else would. Jessica didn't know me either, but she wouldn't turn away, even when it was hard. She held my hand in the hospital and told me I was safe. That's what family does. They don't give up, even when things are messy or scary. Family is showing up. Family is not letting go. She paused, tears blurring the letters. Jessica set down her knife and crossed the room, kneeling beside Emily. "Can I read it?" she asked softly. Emily nodded. Jessica read, her voice thick with emotion, then wrapped Emily in a fierce hug. "You're braver than you know, kiddo. And you're right. Family isn't about being perfect. It's about being there." Later that evening, as the kitchen quieted and the day slipped toward dusk, Emily read her essay aloud to Jessica, Sammy, and even Shadow, who listened through the open window, his breath fogging the glass. "My family is Jessica, Sammy, and Shadow," Emily read, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We found each other in a hard time. We saved each other. Jessica rescued us, but she says we rescued her too. Sometimes family is the people and animals who choose you, who love you not because they have to, but because they want to. Our family is about showing up, being kind, and never giving up, even when we're scared." She looked up, her eyes searching Jessica's face. "Why did you help us?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Jessica knelt, brushing a lock of hair from Emily's cheek. For a moment, she struggled to answer, her own childhood memories flickering in the quiet. She remembered the nights she'd spent waiting for someone to come home, the ache of not belonging, the walls she'd built to keep out disappointment. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Em," she said at last, her voice trembling. "Because sometimes, family finds you, even when you least expect it. And sometimes, when you try to rescue someone, you end up rescuing yourself too." Emily hugged her tightly, and for the first time Jessica let herself cry, not just for the pain they'd survived, but for the healing that had come after. In the days that followed, Emily's essay was shared at school, then printed in the local paper after her teacher sent it to a friend who worked there. Neighbors stopped Jessica at the grocery store to say how moved they were. Other families reached out, offering support, sharing stories of loss, hope, and the ways love had stitched their broken pieces back together. Word spread about the little ranch on the edge of Santa Fe, where a black colt had led a lost child to safety, and where a detective had chosen to fight for kids who weren't her own. People sent letters and cards, some with donations for Shadow's care, others simply to say thank you. The story became a quiet beacon in the community, reminding everyone that acts of rescue, no matter how small, could ripple outward, bringing light where it was needed most. Emily realized, through the act of writing and remembering, that her scars and Shadow's and Jessica's were no longer marks of shame. They were proof of survival, strength, and the kind of loyalty that transforms everything it touches. Shadow's journey from abandoned colt to beloved guardian mirrored her own, and together they had learned that true family is not just who you are born to, but who stands beside you when the world grows dark. That night, as the family gathered on the porch beneath a sky full of stars, Emily leaned against Jessica, Sammy in her lap, Shadow's nose resting on her knee. "We're a good family," she said softly. Jessica smiled, her heart full. "The best I've ever known." In their quiet corner of the world, their story, a story of loss, hope, and the courage to love again, would echo for years to come, inspiring others to reach out, to welcome the lost and wounded, and to never underestimate the power of kindness, loyalty, and love. Adoption Day arrived bright and cloudless, sunlight spilling through the courthouse windows and painting every surface in gold. The old building, which once felt intimidating and cold, seemed now to hum with anticipation and hope. Jessica, dressed in her best denim jacket, stood at the entrance, her hands resting on the shoulders of Emily and Sammy, Shadow at their side, his black coat polished to a high gleam. The courthouse was alive with people, clerks, families, children holding bouquets of wildflowers. But for Jessica, everything blurred except her small family. Emily clung to Jessica's hand, excitement and nerves tangled in her chest, her other hand resting on Shadow's broad neck. Sammy giggled, chasing dust motes with a fistful of toy horses, while Shadow stood steady, as if he understood the significance of the day. In the courtroom, the judge greeted them with a warm smile. He remembered their story, the black colt in the waiting room, the fierce little girl who refused to let go of her brother, the detective who refused to walk away. He gestured for them to come forward. Jessica's heart thudded as she guided Emily and Sammy to the bench, Shadow following with gentle steps that drew smiles from everyone present. The judge's gaze was gentle as he addressed Emily. "Emily, I have to ask, do you want Jessica to be your mom?" Emily blinked back tears, her voice trembling with hope and certainty. "She already is." She hugged Jessica's waist tightly. Shadow, sensing the emotion, nudged Emily's shoulder, his soft wicker echoing through the room. Sammy, always fearless, ran to wrap his arms around Jessica's leg, grinning up at the judge. Jessica steadied her voice, her words strong and clear. "Family begins with kindness, even in the darkest places. Saving one life can change many. We're proof of that." She glanced at Emily and Sammy, then at Shadow, who flicked his ears and gave a soft snort, as if agreeing with every word. The judge smiled, signing the adoption papers with a flourish. "Congratulations. You are, from this day forward, a family." For a heartbeat, time held still. Emily's tears spilled over, pure and joyful. Jessica knelt, gathering both children into her arms, as Shadow lowered his head, nuzzling them close. There was applause from the courtroom, and even the clerks wiped their eyes. The ride home was a celebration. Jessica rolled down the windows so the spring air could fill the truck, Emily and Sammy singing along to the radio. Shadow's trailer rolled behind them, steady and sure, a symbol of how far they'd all come. They stopped at a bakery, buying a cake with "Welcome Home, Family" scrawled in blue frosting. And when they arrived at the ranch, neighbors were waiting, bearing gifts, flowers, casseroles, even a hand-painted sign that read, "The Moore Family Ranch." That afternoon, sunlight spilled across the backyard as friends gathered. The children ran wild, painting each other's faces and feeding carrots to Shadow, who accepted every treat with dignified grace. Jessica, standing by the fence with a mug of sweet tea, took it all in. The laughter, the chatter, the sense of peace that had grown from so much pain. Later, as dusk settled over the land, Jessica gathered Emily, Sammy, and Shadow on the porch. She looked at them, her eyes shining, and spoke softly but with conviction. Rescue doesn't just change the one who is saved. It transforms the rescuer too. I thought I was saving you, but you saved me right back. I learned that scars, seen and unseen, aren't just reminders of pain. They're badges of survival and love. Emily leaned into Jessica, her voice sleepy but strong. "We're not scared anymore. We belong here." Jessica smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind Emily's ear. "That's what family does. We choose each other. We show up, even when it's hard. We love, even when we're scared." As night deepened, friends drifted away, and the ranch quieted. Jessica led the family out to the edge of the pasture. The moon hung high, painting the fields in silver. Shadow walked ahead, his head held high, a living symbol of all they'd overcome. Jessica turned, as if looking out beyond the pasture, beyond the night, speaking not just to Emily and Sammy, but to anyone who might be listening, anywhere. If you ever see a lost soul, don't look away. Every act of rescue can start a ripple. Be the one who helps. It doesn't take perfection, just courage, a little kindness, and a willingness to show up. She squeezed Emily's hand. Sammy reached for Shadow, who lowered his head so the boy could stroke his nose. Together they stepped forward, side by side, their silhouettes blending into the starlit landscape. For years to come, their story would echo across Santa Fe, the detective who found family in the darkness, the siblings who turned pain into strength, the black colt who never left their side. Neighbors would retell how one act of courage saved 3 lives, then inspired dozens more. Inside the house, their new life began, a home alive with music, laughter, and the steady heartbeat of belonging. They faced challenges, setbacks, memories, days when old wounds ached, but always they returned to each other, anchored by love and loyalty. And so Jessica, Emily, Sammy, and Shadow, rescuer and rescued, broken and brave, became a family remade. Scars and all, they stood together in the light, ready for whatever the world would bring. Not perfect, but present. Not unbroken, but unbowed. If you passed their ranch at sunset, you'd see them, a woman, 2 children, and a black colt, moving together through fields of wildflowers and possibility. And you'd know, in your heart, that every lost soul can find their way home, if someone is willing to help.